Greetings!
Good morning.
I'm Pastor Paul.
I'm Pastor Raven.
It's a pleasure to meet with you this morning for Exploring Biblical Wisdoms, Hymn Edition. We're studying the hymns during the season of Lent, and we are on our... I can't remember how many sessions we've done already. Two? One, two? No, we met before this format.
Right.
Second one online.
Online.
I think it's the third or fourth one as a total. What's our hymn today?
Jesus, the very thought of thee.
It's found in the United Methodist hymn number 175. Let's take a listen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have a story behind or thought behind this
I
hymn?
have a thought because the words are so deep. Jesus, the very thought of thee. It's very hard to think of Jesus because we want to think of a person that we can see in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
But the very thought of who he was and what he did is just something that puts you in a different place in life.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. For me, the hymn was one of the first ones, one of the ones where I recognized differences. So this hymn is also well known in the Korean hymn,
Is it?
but there are different verses. Not just the number of verses, because I think there are more. There's like 6 verses in the Korean hymn.
Written by the same person?
Written by the same person, and the translation, I would say, is also different. We were examining this last week also with Martin Luther's hymn.
Yeah.
That translation is always different, but this one was one of the ones that I was caught off guard because I was ready to continue singing, and there was only 4 verses. I thought there were 5, or at least 5.
So you grew up with singing 6 verses of this?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to check the hymn, but I think there were 5 verses.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a longer hymn, which is why I remember it.
Wow.
Most hymns had 3, maybe 4 verses, and this
4
one had
max,
5.
yeah.
Which I would have not enjoyed, but the lyrics, the words to the hymn were more powerful, and so I don't think I minded the extra singing.
I like the second verse. Can I say
Sure,
something about
please.
it? O hope of every contrite heart,
Mm-hmm.
O joy of all the meek, to those who fall, how kind thou art, how good to those who seek. How often do we ever think of being contrite? Having a humble heart. To me, that means humble and willing to learn from God and from the Spirit of Christ. To those who fall, how kind thou art. And we all fall all the time.
Yeah.
And to have God at our back,
Yeah.
Jesus our Lord.
Yeah. Absolutely. I don't have my book with me. I just realized, let me pick it up real quickly. The hymn is attributed to Saint Bernard, or
Bernard of Clairvaux.
yeah, Clairvaux. I was going to ask you for pronunciation. He wanted to become a soldier,
I didn't know that.
but couldn't due to health, and so this dedicated his life to be a monk instead.
Wow.
Does everyone know the difference between like priests and friars and monks? You are familiar with the differences,
Mm-hmm.
or you've probably heard of the different ways that...
A monk gives his whole life to the spiritual life.
That is right.
He's isolated in a group of other spiritual seekers, monks or nuns if it's
Yeah.
women.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
In a monastery.
in a monastery.
Well, he became quite influential. In our secular world, we would call that successful, but Christians don't use that word to attribute to our faith. He was
Right.
quite influential as a monk there are more than 170 different monasteries that were attributed to his leadership, his spiritual leadership in this. He was so renowned and so influential. This was in the 12th century, 11th century, I believe. He was born in the 11th century and then lived into the 12th century. He was so influential that Martin Luther, the gentleman that we studied last week, considered him the best or the most spiritual of monks that have ever been. That's high praise. Martin Luther himself, not a shabby guy.
He probably wanted to be a monk, I'll bet you, if he was Catholic.
Yeah, so...
I don't know that, I'm just being funny, but he was also in his own way so dedicated, Martin Luther. Right. Such a soldier for the Lord.
Yeah. So Saint Bernard was not a priest, and priests, there are two categories of priests. As you know, as Christians, we are all called into priesthood, and so we are all priests. And then there are the ordained priests, those who are like elders in the United Methodist Church and ordained pastors in other denominations. Saint Bernard was not a priest, but was a lifelong monk, one who was simply pious, very devout. The thing that I did not know until I read this story, he wrote other hymns too. In fact, he wrote one that was also quite well known, "O Sacred
Head Now
Wounded," also in the United Methodist Hymnal. It's on page
286.
286. I'm going to, Pastor Raven, please play for us so we can be reminded of the tune.
It is beautiful.
That one is probably musically more beautiful than the other one.
I love it. It is.
The lyrics, I think, are both very meaningful for either hymn. This one, very well suited for the season of Lent and the beginning of Holy Week, which is next 2 Sundays, in 2 Sundays. I don't know about you, I'm getting quite anxious about how we're going to spend Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday together, but more on that in a different video. Yeah. So one of the things that really took heart, that resonated with me, that I'm taking heart to, is this Saint Bernard figure who was very influential at his time. 300 years later for Martin Luther, still quite influential. Remember, they are not from the same era, they're centuries apart, and Martin Luther's still thinking very highly of him, and his words still resonating in the 21st century. What causes that? How is one so influential? And it dawned on me, it's because of his singular focus on Christ. The commonality between both of these hymns is that they are so descriptive, so well describes our relationship and our state of mind when we focus on Christ, either in life or on the cross. And so it was reminding me of John Wesley's 3 simple rules. You are familiar with them, yes?
Yes, but you say them.
Okay. Do good, do no harm, and stay in love with God, the way that I remember it. It's paraphrased, by the way. Do good, do no harm, stay in love with God. How important that last bit is, to stay in love with God.
And believe it or not, that takes work.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, we have so many distractions all around us in middle-class America, or just America in general. We're so blessed with so many material blessings, but also distractions.
Yeah.
that to keep focused on seeking God is a challenge.
Yeah, it is. And why it's so important. I think it's easy for us to get caught up in trying to do good or trying to do no harm. But if we continue just those two aspects, I think that leads to burnout and tiredness and a morale that kind of sinks. Like I keep giving and keep giving. Mm-hmm. When is it going to come to me, or when will we get a break from all of this? And that I think is a symptom of not doing the third, and what I believe St. Bernard did really well to stay in love with God and allow that to fuel. John Wesley should have said it like reversed. Stay in love with God, do good, do no harm. And I think that may have been easier caught. Right. Well, the hope is that all of you will continue to stay in love with God during this season of Lent and during this social distancing, stay at home. It's a good time to do some journaling and to pray and to stay connected with each other.
And I think even looking at the words of this song, 286, O Sacred Head Now Wounded, is a way to stay in love with God. Because, O sacred head now wounded with grief and shame weighed down, you can really get a picture of what it was like for Jesus, of what he gave of himself, his whole life, obviously, but out of love. And for us to try and tune into that love is what we need to do.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor Raven, for spending time with me.
You bet.
And thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.